Modern corporate strategy relies heavily on data mining. We can track millions of transactions and measure exact returns. We can build massive matrices to predict our market trends. But eventually, the spreadsheet hits a sudden blank spot. Mathematical models and standard statistical analyses are excellent at counting what happened. However, they struggle to explain the complex human behaviors that cause those numbers or predict emergent cultural shifts. To navigate those blank spots, organizations have to look past the tradition of treating qualitative research as mere subjective opinion gathering. Organizations deploy qualitative market research, or QMR, to identify the structural, nonlinear variables that quantitative surveys were never designed to process. To understand how this mechanism actually works, we have to look at the organizational value of qualitative data through 4 distinct lenses. First, we look at the specific limits of traditional market research. Second, we examine it through knowledge management. Third, we analyze organizational culture to see where these methods thrive. And fourth, we address the non-methodological, pragmatic reasons organizations buy it. Analyzing these 4 pillars reveals why highly rational, mathematically driven companies deliberately invest millions into formalizing soft data. Within market research, organizations generally have 2 primary needs: diagnosis, understanding why a current situation exists, and prognosis, predicting how people will respond to new variables. The executive suite operates on a completely different logic than the rest of the world. From the boardroom, measuring simple data points seems sufficient. But the end user exists in a domestic, cultural context where decisions are not made on a spreadsheet. Extracting accurate data requires a different tool. We can map the limitations of direct questioning using a communication model known as the Johari window, divided into 4 quadrants of human awareness. This top left quadrant represents conscious factors, things people are aware of and will readily say. If you ask a direct question about price, you get a direct answer. This is the absolute limit of standard quantitative surveys. In the top right, we find private feelings. People know these truths, but social desirability bias prevents them from admitting them on a standard questionnaire. Entering this quadrant requires a qualitative approach. There are physiological constraints to verbal questioning. As demonstrated by Roger Sperry's split brain research, the left hemisphere handles logic, while the right processes nonverbal intuition. This brings us back to our model, specifically the bottom left quadrant, intuitive associations. Consumers possess critical knowledge here, but they often lack the left brain vocabulary to express it. Qualitative methodology bypasses these verbal limits. By creating safe environments and utilizing projective techniques, researchers can penetrate this quadrant and extract those intuitive associations. The system works by systematically bypassing conscious rationalization to uncover the actual hidden drivers of choice. If market research is about the consumer, our second lens, knowledge management, is about the corporation. This discipline separates organizational knowledge into 2 categories: explicit knowledge, which is codified and transmittable data, and tacit knowledge, which is context-dependent on spoken intuition. We can map an organization's intellectual capital using this grid based on Fahey's knowledge matrix, plotting what a company knows against what it realizes it lacks. This top right quadrant holds known gaps. The organization knows exactly what information it is missing. Standard market research operates here, filling predefined voids with explicit data. Raw tacit knowledge is notoriously difficult to capture. These are the intuitive routines target audiences use every day, but never formally articulate to the company. That unarticulated logic creates the bottom right quadrant, unknown gaps. These are critical market realities and cultural shifts that the organization does not even realize it is missing. Qualitative research is unstructured and responsive, uniquely engineered to spot unpredicted variables. A researcher can follow tangents that a fixed survey would ignore. This process externalizes raw, tacit market behaviors, transforming them into explicit, usable corporate intellectual capital. Qualitative research serves as an organizational early warning system. It maps invisible market variables long before they manifest as a drop in quarterly sales. Even with these capabilities, qualitative data thrives in certain decision-making environments while being rejected by others. This brings us to the third lens, organizational culture. Using Chun-Wei Chu's models of organizational decision-making, we can see how corporate structures handle ambiguity. First is the rational mode. Here, organizational goals are completely clear, the analytical inputs are thoroughly known, and decisions follow rigid, standard procedures to produce a clearly defined output. Because qualitative research relies on subjective judgment, it struggles in a purely formulaic system that demands statistical validity for every action. However, most high-level strategy occurs in the process mode. Here, the organization's ultimate goals are clear, but methods are undefined, requiring an iterative loop of problem definition and evaluation. Qualitative research fits perfectly into the center of this iterative loop. It provides the conceptual groundwork necessary to make decisions when precise methods remain ambiguous. Modern corporate culture is adapting to this reality. Organizations are moving away from absolute reliance on mathematics and are increasingly willing to embrace holistic thinking. Integrating qualitative data allows leaders to conceptualize and frame ambiguous problems. They define the shape of an issue before attempting to strictly measure it. QMR serves as a necessary optimization engine for process-oriented cultures that must navigate profound market uncertainty. Our final lens focuses on the human and pragmatic factors influencing corporate procurement of qualitative projects. The first factor is a preference for narrative. This visualization represents qualitative reporting, physicalizing chaotic data, weaving contradictory human behaviors into a single cohesive document. For senior decision-makers, this narrative style translates messy observations into actionable business strategy. Executives require the ability to interrogate the findings. They must question the questioner. A static spreadsheet cannot defend its methodology or provide context, but a qualitative researcher brings dynamic value, possessing first-hand experiential data from actual interviews. In environments where statistical validity is not the goal, clients rely on proxies for reliability. An individual researcher's cultural fit with the organization and their deep sector experience become the primary markers of accuracy. This experiential validation builds executive trust. Pure algorithmic data, no matter how vast, cannot replicate the reassurance of a trusted advisor verifying the ground truth. Ultimately, the pragmatic value of qualitative research lies in delivering deep, actionable insights wrapped in human trust, granting executives the confidence to make high-stakes decisions. If we return to our original diagram, we can see how these four architectural pillars of organizational insight lock together. Through market research, we achieve depth extraction, mapping the psychology that exists far beyond the limits of conscious measurement. Through knowledge management, we execute tacit codification, turning invisible cultural logic into explicit intellectual capital. Through organizational culture, we ensure process alignment, fitting into dynamic, iterative decision-making environments. And through the pragmatic lens, we build narrative trust, securing the experiential validation required for executive action. Integrating these four functions reveals QMR as an intentional, sophisticated strategy, a core component of organizational intelligence. Quantitative data is essential. It measures the scope and scale of a reality, but qualitative research defines what that reality actually consists of. Before an organization can accurately measure its market, it must first possess the rigorous qualitative insight to understand